finding his way to classes. There were 142 staircases at Hogwarts, wide, sweeping ones, narrow, rickety ones, some that led somewhere different on a Friday, some with a vanishing step halfway up that you had to remember to jump. Then there were doors that wouldn't open unless you asked politely or tickled them exactly the right place, and doors that wasn't really doors at all, but solid was just pretending. It was so very hard to remember where anything was, because its own seemed to move around a lot. The people in the porches kept going to visit each other, and Harry was sure the coats of armor could work. The ghosts didn't have either. It was always a nasty shock when one of them glided suddenly through a door you were trying to open. Nearly Headless Nick was always happy to point new Gryffindors in the right direction, but Beavis the Poltergeist was worth to lock door and trick staircase if you met him when you were late for class. He would drop waste paper baskets on your head, pull rocks from under your feet, pelt you with piece of chalk, or sneak up behind you, invisible, grab your nose and scratch, got your conch. Even worse than Beavis, if that was possible, was the caretaker, Uncle Finch. Harry and Ron managed on the wrong side of him on their very first morning. Finch found them trying to force their way through a door which unluckily turned out to be the entrance to the outbound corridor on the third floor. He wouldn't believe they were lost, was sure they were trying to break into it on purpose, and was threatening to lock them in the dungeons where they were rescued by Professor Quirrell, who was passing. Finch had called Miss Morris a scrawny, dust-colored creature with bulging, lamp-like eyes just like Finch. Ziba trod the corridors alone, break a rule in front of her, just 1-2 outline, she'd whisper for Finch, who would appear, wheezing. 2 seconds later, Finch knew the secret passway of the school better than anyone, except perhaps the Weasley twins, and could pop up as suddenly as any of the gods. The students all hated him, and it was the dearest ambition of many to give Miss Norris a good kick. And then, once you had money to buy them, there were the lessons themselves. There was a lot more to magic, as Harry quickly found out, than waving your wand and saying a few funny words. They had to study the night skies through their telescope every Wednesday at midnight and learn the names of different stars and the movement of the planets. 3 times a week they went out to the greenhouse behind the castle to study herbology with a dumpy little called Professor's Brood, where they learned how to take care of industrial plants and fungi and found out what they were used for. Easily the most boring lesson was History of Magic, which was the only class taught by a ghost. Professor Binns had been very old indeed when he had fallen asleep in front of the staff room fire and got up next morning to teach, leaving his body behind him. Binns droned on and on while they scribbled down names and got Emeric the Evan and Ulrich the Oddball mixed up. Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher, was a tiny little wizard who had to stand on a pile of books to see over his desk. At the start of their first lesson, he took the register, and when he reached Harry's name, he gave an excited squeak and stoppered out of sight. Professor McGonagall was again different. Harry had been quite right to think he wasn't a teacher to cross. Strict and clever, she gave them a talking to the moment they had sat down in her third class. Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts, she said. showed the class how it had gone all silver and pointy and gave everyone a rare smile. The class everyone had been really looking forward to was defense against the dark art, but Kiran's lesson turned out to be a bit of joke. His classroom smelled strongly of garlic, which everyone said was what of a vampire he'd met in Romania and was afraid would be coming back to get him one of the days. His turban, he told them, had been given to him by an African prince as a thank you for getting rid of a troublesome zombie. But they weren't sure they believed in story. For one thing, when Seamus Finnegan asked eagerly to hear how Kira had found of the zombie, Kira went pink and started talking about the weather. For another, they had noticed that a funny smell hung around the turban, and the Wesley twins insisted that it was stuck full of garlic as well, so that Quirrell was protected wherever he went. Harry was very relieved to find out that he wasn't miles behind everyone else. Lots of people had come from Hooker family list and, like him, hadn't had any idea that they were witches and wizards. There was so much to learn that even people like Ron didn't have much of a head start. Friday was an important day for Harry and Ron. They finally managed to find their way down the great hall for breakfast without getting lost once. "What have we got today?" Harry asked Ron as he poured the sugar on his porridge. "Double portion with the Slytherins," said Ron. Snape's head of Slytherin's house. "They say he always favored them. We'll be able to see if it's true." "Which McGonagall favored us," said Harry. Professor McGonagall was head of the Gryffindor house, but it hadn't stopped her giving them a huge pile of homework the day before. Just then, the boss arrived. Harry had got used to this by now, but it had given him a bit of shock on the first morning when about 100 owls had suddenly streamed into the great hall during breakfast, circling the table until they saw their owners and dropping letters and packets onto their laps. Hagrid hadn't brought Harry anything so far. She sometimes flew into the nibble his ear and have a bit of toast before going off to sleep in the owlery with the other school owls. This morning, however, she fluttered down between the marmalade and the sugar bowl and dropped a note onto Harry's plate. Harry tore it open at once. "Dear Harry," he said in a very unsteady score, "I know you get Friday afternoons off, so would you like to come and have a cup of tea with me around 3? I want to hear all about your first week. Send us an answer back with Hedwig. Hagrid." Harry borrowed Ron's scribble. "Yes, please. See you later," on the back of the note, and sent Hedwig off again. It was lucky that Harry had tea with Hagrid to look forward to, because the potion lesson turned out to be the worst thing that had happened to him so far. At the start of term banquet, Harry had got the idea that Professor Snape disliked him. By the end of the first potion lesson, he knew he had been wrong. Snape didn't dislike Harry. He hated him. Potions lesson took place out in one of the dungeons. It was colder here than up in the main castle and would have been quite creepy enough without the picker and animals floating in glass jars all around the world. Snape, like Flitwick, started the class by taking the register, and like Flitwick, he paused at Harry's name. "Ah, yes," he said softly. "Harry Potter. Oh, smoky. Snape was still ignoring Hermione's quivering hand. What is the difference, Potter, between xoxo and wolfsbane? At this, Hermione stood up, her hand stretching towards the dungeon ceiling. I don't know, said Harry quietly. I think Hermione does, though. Why don't you try her? A few people laughed. Harry caught Summer's eye and Summer's wink. Snape, however, was not pleased. Sit down. He snapped at Hermione. For your information, Potter, asphodel and wormwood make a sleeping potion so powerful is known as the draught of the living dead. A bishop is a stone taken from the stomach of a god and will save you from most poisons. As for xoxo and wolfsbane, they are same plant, which also goes by the name of aconite. Well, why aren't you all copying that down? There was a sudden rumbling for quills and parchment over the noise, Snape said, and a point will be taken from Gryffindor house for your check. Things didn't improve for the Gryffindors as the potion's lesson continued. Snape put them all into pairs and set them to mixing up a simple potion to cure boys. He swept around in his long black cloak, watching them wet, dry, nettles and gross snake fangs, criticizing almost everyone except Malfoy, whom he seemed to like. He was just telling everyone to look at the perfect way Malfoy has to eat horn slugs when cloud of acid green smoke and allow hissing fill the dungeon. Neville had somehow managed to melt Zimmer's cauldron into a twist blob, and their poison was seeping across the stone floor, burning holes in people's soul. Within seconds, the whole class was standing on their stone while Neville, who had been drenched in the poison when the cauldron collapsed, moaned in pain as angry red boys sprang up on over his arm and legs. Idiot boy, Snape, clearing the spleen poison away with one wave of his wand. I suppose you added the porcupine queens before taking the cotton off the fire. Neville whimpered as boys started to pop up on over his nose. Take him up to the hospital wing. Snape spat at Seamus. Then he roused on Harry and Ron, who had been walking next to Neville. You, Potter, why didn't you tell him not to add the queens? Thought he'd make you look good if he got it wrong, did you? That's another point you lost for Gryffindor. This was so unfair that Harry opened his mouth to argue, but Ron kicked him behind their cauldron. Don't push it, he muttered. I've heard Snape can turn very nasty. As they climbed the step out of the dungeon an hour later, Harry's mind was racing and his spirit was low. He'd lost 2 points for Gryffindor in his very first week. Why did Snape hate him so much? Cheer up, said Ron. Snape's always taking point of Fred and Chicho. Can I come and meet Hagrid with you? At 5 to 3, they left the castle and made their way across the grounds. Hagrid lived in a small wooden house on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. A crossbow and a pair of glasses were outside the front door. When Harry knocked their head, a plastic scrabbling from inside and several booming back. Then Hagrid's voice rang out, saying, Back, Fang, back. Hagrid's big hairy face appeared in the crack as he pulled the door open. Hang on, he said, Back, Fang. He let them in, struggling to keep a hold on the collar of an enormous black bar horn. There was only one room inside. Hams and pheasants were hanging from the ceiling. A copper kettle was boiling on the open fire. In a corner stood a massive bed with a patchwork queen over it. Make yourself at home, said Hagrid, letting go of Fang, who bowed straight at Ron and started licking his ears. Like Hagrid, Fang was clearly not as fierce as he looked. This is Ron, Harry told Hagrid, who was pouring boiling water into a lake teapot and put change the subject on purpose. While Ron told Hagrid all about Charlie's work with dragons, Harry picks up a piece of paper that was lying on the tables under the tea cozy. It was a cutting from the Daily Prophet. Gringotts break-in latest investigation continued into the break-in at Gringotts on 31st July. Widely believed to be the work of dark wizards or witches unknown, Gringotts Goblin today insist that nothing had been taken. The vault that was searched and in fact been emptied the same day. But we are not telling you what was in there, so keep your nose out if you know what's good for you, said the Gringotts Goblin this April. Harry remembered Ron telling him on the train that someone had tried to rob Gringotts, but Ron hadn't mentioned the date. Hagrid, said Harry, that Gringotts break-in happened on my birthday. It might have been happening while we were there. There was no doubt about it. Hagrid definitely didn't meet Harry's eye this time. He grunted and offered him another rock cake. Harry read the story again. The vault that was searched had in fact been empty earlier the same day. Hagrid had emptied vault 713, if you could call it emptying, taking out that grubby little packet. Had that been what the thief were looking for? As Harry and Ron walked away to the castle for dinner, their pocket was down with rock cake they'd been too polite to refuse. Had they thought that none of the lesson it had so far given him as much to think about as did with Hagrid? Had Hagrid collected that packet just in time? Where was it now? And did Hagrid know something about Snape that he didn't want to tell Harry? Okay guys, that's all for today. Now good night.